This story is called A Fair Partner's Wife. Exposes her husband and my wife. I am Richard, a 42-year-old electrical engineer, living a happy suburban life in a peaceful neighborhood in Virginia Beach, Virginia. For the last 15 years, I've been married to Patricia, an extraordinary woman, a doting mother and a respected high school English teacher in our community. We are parents to two beautiful children. Our delightful 12-year-old daughter, Charlotte, and our vivacious son, Henry, who just turned 8. Our life was the embodiment of the ideal family existence, a comfortable 4-bedroom house, a playful family dog and the ever-symbolic white picket fence. Our marriage was built upon the foundation of shared respect and common ideals within our circles. We were affectionately dubbed the Dream Team, a couple that represented stability, reliability and unconditional support. We rolled out the storms that shook many marriages. We reveled in the good times and we were pillars of strength for each other during the tough phases. But as the years flowed, I found myself engulfed in a situation I had never envisioned. Patricia was always engrossed in her work, frequently bringing it home grading assignments and crafting lesson plans. Late into the night, she exuded passion for her profession, regularly attending educational conferences and seminars and going the extra mile to provide the finest learning experience for her students. However, over the past few months, a lingering unease began to pervade my thoughts about her unusually frequent late nights and extended weekend absence. She'd been joining more professional development seminars than normal, and her grading sessions were extending into the wee hours. I attributed it to the demanding end-of-school year period or possibly some added responsibilities she had undertaken. Unfortunately, there was a nagging, unsettling inkling that persistently haunted my senses. I shrugged it off numerous times, convincing myself that I was merely overthinking. After all, we were Richard and Patricia, the perfect pair. The ones who seemed to have it all figured out. The trajectory of things took a sharp turn one afternoon when Patricia dashed off to another seminar, accidentally leaving behind her cell phone. The device buzzed and beeped, relentlessly signaling incoming messages that she would ordinarily respond to in an instant, overpowered by curiosity. I found myself picking up her phone. The screen was flooded with messages, all from a certain mark and name unfamiliar to me. As I scrolled through the seemingly benign work-related conversation, I found myself spiraling into the depths of suspicion and apprehension. Was my wife, Patricia, the woman I entrusted my heart and life to, having an affair? The messages between Patricia and this mark were businesslike, but it was their frequency and a subtle undertone of familiarity that seemed out of place. I was stumped. Was I reading too much into it? I was unsure if my own insecurities were feeding these suspicions. But damn, I couldn't shake off this feeling that something wasn't right. Over the next few days, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with Patricia's actions. I became aware of her long phone conversations, her secretive smiles while texting, and her excursions that took longer than usual. She remained engrossed in her phone, and her late-night grading sessions became more prolonged. One evening while Patricia was in the shower, I decided to look into her phone again, hoping to dispel my growing unease. As I scrolled through the flood of messages, a particular exchange caught my eye. It was a plan to meet at a quaint coffee shop outside town, a spot not renowned for its relevance to the educational community. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I replaced the phone just as I heard the water stop running. I decided to confront Patricia the next day as we sat down for breakfast, the kids chattering away, oblivious to the silent storm brewing between their parents. I took a deep breath and asked Patricia about Mark. She looked at me slightly taken aback and then explained that Mark was a fellow teacher from a neighboring school district and they were collaborating on a new English curriculum project. Her explanation was pause and her reaction genuine. My worries seemed baseless. After all, networking and collaboration are fundamental to professional growth. However, the seeds of suspicion had already germinated in my mind. Each late-night working session, every secretive phone call was now water nourishing these seeds. Could it be that my perfect Patricia, my wife of 15 years, was not so perfect? After all, the next few weeks were a grueling test of patience and endurance. I wrestled with my thoughts, oscillating between bouts of guilt for doubting Patricia and moments of despair. When suspicion took the helm, I knew I had to be certain before accusing Patricia of anything. An unfounded accusation could spell doom for our relationship, irreversible damage that I wasn't prepared to inflict on our marriage. I decided to take a methodical approach to gather undeniable proof before challenging Patricia about the nature of her relationship with Mark. I began my clandestine investigation, delving into Patricia's social media, her frequent locations, call logs, and anything that could either confirm my fears or assuage my suspicions. It felt unethical to invade Patricia's privacy like this, but I was left with no choice. I needed answers. And the only way to find them was to navigate through this uncomfortable path. During my investigation, I found several pictures of Patricia and Mark together at different places: at the coffee shop, at a park, and even at an art gallery. They were always in a group with other colleagues, but something about their body language seemed off. They were a bit too close and a bit too comfortable. Every discovery, every subtle hint strengthened the looming specter of betrayal. The detective work took a toll on me. I had become distant, more reserved, losing myself in the vast sea of uncertainty and despair. Charlotte and Henry began noticing the change. They couldn't comprehend the sudden alteration in their father's demeanor. I tried to maintain normalcy for their sake, but the mask was cracking as I sank deeper into this private investigation. Each day was becoming harder to face. I held on to a sliver of hope, hoping that my fears were unfounded. That Patricia, my loving wife, was still the woman. I thought I knew the woman who stood by me through thick and thin. But the more I dived in, the more elusive the truth seemed. The decision was agonizing, but I couldn't live in the shadow of a doubt any longer. I decided to hire a private investigator. I knew I needed irrefutable proof before confronting Patricia. I can only imagine the fallout if my accusations were baseless. I found an experienced, private investigator in my area. I handed him the details I had gathered while waiting for the private investigator to do his thing. During this time, my relationship with Patricia suffered significantly. Conversations were short, interactions were limited, and our home was filled with silent tension. She sensed a change in me but blamed it on stress at my job. I wanted to hold her, kiss her, but every look at her reminded me of the lurking suspicion and the impending revelation. 3 weeks later, the private investigator called me into his office. As I sat down, the private investigator gave me a file. As I flipped through the photographs and conversations he had gathered, my world came crashing down. There were pictures of Patricia and Mark in intimate situations, a sight that felt like a knife twisting in my heart. The friendly meetings and the professional collaboration were all a smokescreen. I was thunderstruck. The woman I had loved and trusted was living a dual life. One that didn't include me. The evidence was irrefutable. It was a defining moment in my life at point of no return. I realized that all the signs were there, but I had chosen to overlook them, trusting in the love that I thought we shared. I was in a daze the whole way. When I drove back home, I had decided to speak to Patricia the next day to lay bare the reality and seek answers to the countless questions that haunted me. The next day I confronted Patricia about my suspicions. I then told her I knew about her and Mark. She says, "I don't know what you are talking about." I presented her with the file. A silent testament to her betrayal. As she flipped through the pages, her features softened, surrendering to the stark reality of her deception. She seemed to shrink before my eyes. The confident woman replaced by a fragile figure burning with guilt. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I was lonely and he was there," she continued. "It was just a moment of weakness that turned into many." "Why didn't you talk to me?" I asked. She sighed. "I don't know," she replied. "I was selfish. I guess I didn't want to hurt you." I convinced myself that it was harmless, that it wouldn't affect us, but it did affect us. "Patricia," I said, "it affected me. I'm sorry." She said, her voice choked with regret, but the apology felt hollow and afterthought to a relationship scarred by betrayal. I spent the rest of the day locked away in my study, reflecting on the morning's revelation and contemplating my next steps. I couldn't stay with Patricia. Not after the breach of trust, but the thought of ending our 15-year marriage was daunting, an unwelcome conclusion to a love story that was supposed to last forever. The following day, I contacted an attorney to get the divorce process started. When I had a meeting with my attorney, he told me to keep my emotions in check, handing me a stack of forms. "This is a legal matter. Now your feelings can cloud your judgment." His words echoed in my mind. I was contemplating the division of our assets. Patricia and I had built a substantial estate together, but now it felt like a pile of rubble. A testament to the ruins of our relationship. We owned a beautiful home, an investment property, and had a substantial amount of savings. My business was thriving and Patricia had a successful career of her own. We had to decide who got what during this period. Patricia and I barely interacted. Our once vibrant home had transformed into a silent battlefield. Each of us licking our wounds in our separate corners. She moved into the guest room and our interactions were limited to brief cold exchanges about divorce proceedings. I was determined to keep things civil, to separate without animosity. But every time I saw Patricia, I felt a wave of anger, but I had it under control, a reminder of the wound that was yet to heal. I had to remind myself that this wasn't about revenge. It was about moving forward, about healing from the pain she had inflicted. We didn't go in front of a judge. We both agreed to mediation. We both had our own attorneys. After days of negotiation and countless revisions, we finally agreed on a settlement. Patricia would keep the house while I opted for the investment property and a larger share of our savings. Our joint assets were divided equally and we decided on fair alimony. Patricia apologized again, but I was beyond the point of accepting apologies. A few weeks after the settlement, we had to figure out a schedule with the kids that was heartbreaking. Not seeing my kids, Charlotte and Henry, every day, we both agreed on 50-50 custody going forward. The kids were totally left in the dark. But in the end, something strange happened. I was going to lightly expose my cheating wife. But Mark, my ex-wife's partner's wife, found out about the affair and blasted her and her husband all over social media. He was reprimanded at his school and my ex-wife was reprimanded, but neither one of them was fired or suspended. Mark's wife ended up filing for divorce from him. She ended up keeping the house, losing custody of his kids, and paying alimony and child support. I don't know what the amount was. All I want now is to be there for my kids and be a good father and make sure they are in a safe environment. Patricia has contacted me a few times pitching reconciliation and I responded with, "I don't think so. I don't trust you anymore. Let's just be good parents to our kids." The advice I want to give anyone that is suspecting their spouse is cheating is, don't ever overlook the red flags because you think they have a job that usually brings stress. Investigate regardless. I decided to not act sooner because I thought my wife was just under a lot of stress. Don't fall for that shit. Investigate as soon as you encounter red